This is a Draw My Life rendition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, prepared by yours truly, Conrad, Cam, and Jacob. We begin in an Arctic setting where we are introduced to Captain Walton, a scientific explorer. He and his men spot a man out on the ice named Victor Frankenstein, and they bring him onto their ship. Here, Frankenstein begins to tell them his life story. From a young age, Frankenstein had become interested in the world of science. He was fascinated by alchemy, chemistry, and life itself, but would need to wait till secondary school to further explore this passion. He grew up in Geneva with his father, Alphonse, and his mother, Caroline. He had a younger brother named William, and his adoptive sister, Elizabeth, who they referred to as his cousin, lived with the family as well. He went to university in Ingolstadt. There, he studied modern science and organic chemistry, and within a few years he's mastered all that his professors have to teach him. But while spending vast amounts of time in the lab, he becomes fascinated with the secret of life and the idea of reanimation. And eventually, Victor Frankenstein uncovers it and begins to experiment. He devotes himself to this labor. He neglects everything else: family, friends, studies, and his social life. And he grows increasingly pale, lonely, and obsessed with his work. One November night in the lab, Frankenstein brings a corpse made of dead animal and human parts to life. He is so scared by this creation, however, that he simply runs away, and the creature follows suit. Frankenstein then falls ill as the winter approaches, and stays that way until spring. He is nursed back to health by his friend Clerval, whom he met in university. Come spring, however, Frankenstein receives a rather gloomy letter from his father, informing him that his younger brother, William, has been murdered, strangled. On his journey back, he sees the monster he created, and he knows it was him. However, in reality, one of their servants, Justine, had been framed for the murder and was killed as a result. Frankenstein and his family then decide to go on a sightseeing trip through the mountains, a vacation of sorts. But while on this trip, Frankenstein encounters the monster, and the monster begins to tell him a story. The monster explains how he simply didn't know how to exist. He couldn't think, speak, or survive, and this made his existence extremely difficult. After leaving the lab, the monster stumbled across a village, but the locals were quick to shoo him off due to his horrific complexion. Eventually, he finds shelter in a small shed on the side of a cottage. There was a crack in the wall where he could see into the house and view the residents, and he watched them carry out their daily lives. The cottage belonged to the DeLacy family. The father was a blind old man, and his two children, Felix and Agatha, lived in the cottage with him. By listening to them interact, the monster soon learned to speak and understand language, and realized the value of a strong relationship. Over time, the monster found 3 books in the forest. He used these books to practice reading and pass time. Eventually, he learned to read the papers that he found in his jacket, detailing how he was created, who Frankenstein was, and where he could find his creator. The monster began to hate Frankenstein as he knew this was the man who condemned him to this gloomy existence. One day, when everyone had left the cottage except the blind old man, the monster entered the cottage and had a conversation with the old man. The monster is happy because the blind man treats him normally, since he doesn't know what the monster looks like. However, when the others arrive, they are quick to chase him out. Shortly after this, they sell the cottage and leave, making the monster very upset. Now, we fast forward to a point in time where the monster arrives in Geneva. He arrives in Geneva and comes across a young boy, and he demands the boy guide him through this new place. However, when the boy says he's a Frankenstein, the monster kills him. This boy was William, and this confirms that the monster did indeed kill William. Forward to present day, the monster is still lonely and neglected by all, and he makes this clear to Frankenstein. As a result, the monster demands that Frankenstein make him a mate as ugly as him to live with. He threatens to kill more people if Frankenstein does not comply. Frankenstein then embarks on a trip to Scotland with his longtime friend Clerval. He plans out how he will create this mate and puts his plan into action. He rents a small cottage and begins to create the second monster. This second monster is a female version of what he has already created, but Frankenstein becomes frightened by his work and stops himself, destroying the new creature. This makes the monster very angry, and he swears his revenge. Later on, Frankenstein is arrested in Ireland for the murder of Clerval. The monster has claimed yet another victim, and Frankenstein is the only plausible suspect. He becomes very ill once again, but is nursed back to health and released from jail when they realize he's innocent. Frankenstein then marries Elizabeth, his adoptive sister, and they are very happy. They love each other a lot, but Frankenstein fears the worst and stands watch on their wedding night with a gun, remembering the monster's promise to visit him on his wedding night. But the monster prevails once again, killing Frankenstein's wife, which indirectly causes the death of his father. Frankenstein then makes it his mission to take down the monster, chasing him further and further north until he ends up on Captain Walton's boat in present day. He then dies shortly after he finishes his life story. Later, the monster visits the dead scientist and is never seen again. And that, my friends, is the story of Frankenstein's monster.